Foreign Minister, the summit is happening in Helsinki. President Putin, President Trump together. Is this the post-West world order that you talked of in the past? Has it now arrived?
Well, I think we are in the post-West world order, but this order is being shaped, and it will take a long time. It's a historical epoch, if you want. And certainly after 5 or so centuries of domination of the collective West, as it were, it's not very easy to adjust to new realities when there are other powerhouses, economically, financially, and politically. China, India, Brazil, African countries are going to be very much on the rise as soon as they resolve at least some of the conflicts which are there on the continent. Russia is certainly would like to be an independent world player, independent in the sense that we don't want to violate any international law norms, but the decisions which we would be taking on the basis of international law would not be influenced by pressure, money, sanctions, threats, or anything else.
So Russia's shaping that world order, that is clear.
It's not that Russia is shaping this world order, it's history, it's the development itself. You cannot really hope to contain these new, powerful economically and financially countries. You cannot ignore their role in the world trade and world economy. Attempts are being made to slow down this process by new tariffs, new sanctions for good or for bad reason, in violation of WTO principles and so on. But this is, I think it's a logical reaction, trying to slow down something which is objective and which does not depend on any single administration in any country.
But Europe has something to fear from that world order that you just mapped out there.
What was that?
Well, the world order that you mapped out involved all sorts of countries. You didn't mention where the EU fits into that. Do they need to worry about that new world order?
EU, of course, is part of the collective West, with the addition of new members from Eastern Europe. But the European Union is a very important pillar of any world order. As for the Russian Federation, this is our biggest trade partner, in spite of the fact that after the unfortunate developments and wrongly understood interpretation of what the coup d'etat is, the volume of trade since 2014 between Russia and the European Union went down 50%, but it is still more than $250 billion, and it's our number one trading partner as a collective, as a union. But the European Union certainly is now fighting to make sure that it is not lost in this new world order which is being shaped. It is not easy because the reliance on the United States is something which quite a number of the EU members want to keep. There are some other EU members who believe that they should be a bit more self-sufficient in military matters, for example. The initiative of President Macron and Germany to consider some kind of European defense capabilities being beefed up is a manifestation of this case. But so far, and I'm watching the EU summit, which is going on right now, and the discussion on migration brought an interesting thought to my head, namely, it's about relationship between NATO and EU. NATO bombed Libya, turned Libya into a black hole through which waves of migrants, illegal migrants, rushed to Europe. Now EU is cleaning the broken china for NATO. So I think...
Well, actually, NATO, you talk about NATO's involvement in Libya, but then there's Russia's involvement in Syria, and that's also created millions of refugees.
Yes, but I would challenge you that the Russian involvement in Syria on the basis of legitimate request from the legitimate government recognized by all as the representative of Syria in the United Nations it took place in September 2015, a year and a half into the Arab Spring embracing Syria, and the bulk of the refugees already was outside Syria by the time we came to the rescue of the legitimate government.
Well, you talk about the legitimate government. That's also a government responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of its own citizens, making millions homeless, a gas-killing animal, as President Trump, your ally, puts it. I mean, do you rest easy being allied with that kind of government?
Well, I wouldn't go into the names which President Trump used to describe some of the world leaders. It's not something done in concrete. It might change. What I want to say is it's a war. It's a war which started by mistakes made on the part of everyone, including the Syrian government. I believe these disturbances could be handled politically at the earlier stage, but we have now on our hands what is the result of outside forces having tried to use this situation in order to reshape the map of the Middle East, of the Northern Africa, by trying to get into Syria without any invitation and trying to promote their own agenda there. So the efforts which we are now undertaking together with Turkey, Iran, and both of them are present on the ground, Turkey without invitation, Iran with invitation of the government, but we managed pragmatically to create what we call Astana process, Astana format. And the Syrian government, given the fact that Russia, Iran cooperate with Turkey on the basis of decisions which lead to de-escalation, the Syrian government accepted Astana process as such, and it's part of the process. Together with the armed opposition, they regularly meet and try to create conditions for the resolution of the Security Council, Resolution 2254, to be implemented.
Let me ask again, though, about President Assad, because a lot of people want to know, what is there to like about President Assad?
We don't like anybody. The diplomacy and politics is not about liking or disliking. It's for the human beings as individuals to use this terminology. President Assad is protecting the sovereignty of his country. He is protecting his country and, in broader sense, the region from terrorism, which was really about a couple of weeks from taking over Damascus in September 2015. We did not want the repetition of tragedies which happened during the last couple of decades through the adventures, or maybe even more than a couple of decades. It started closer to the end of last century in Afghanistan, when the United States decided to support militarily, financially, and otherwise Mojahideens who were fighting the Soviet troops. I wouldn't dwell upon why the Soviet troops were there, but the method the United States used to counter this presence, by the way, the USSR was also invited legally by the government, which was recognized legitimate, but the United States decided to use Mojahideens to fight the Soviet troops, hoping that after the job is done, they could handle those Mojahideens. That's how Al-Qaeda appeared, and the United States lost total control about this beast whom they created, basically. Then there was an adventure in Iraq on the very false pretense. Now everybody knows this, even Tony Blair admitted that this was a mistake, but the fact of the matter is, just like Al-Qaeda was born in Afghanistan, ISIL, Daesh was born after the intervention in Iraq. Now that Libya was invaded in gross violation of the Security Council resolution, that Syria is where it is now, there is another beast which was born, Jabhat al-Nusra, which changes names, but which is another terrorist organization. So whatever civilized West is trying to bring to the Middle East and North Africa turns out to be in favor of terrorists.
But that's a very impressive whistle-stop tour of history. But I want to ask you about the present, though, and about President Assad. You say it's not about liking President Assad.
Sure.
So does that mean that Russia would be prepared to see him go and, you know, do the job, finish the war, and then he goes?
That's the position which is not Russian position, it's the position of the Security Council, endorsed by each and every country on earth, that the future of Syria must be decided by the Syrian people themselves. That
so you have no view on how long he stays?
That there must be a new constitution. On the basis of a new constitution, there must be elections. And elections should be free, fair, monitored by the United Nations, and all Syrian citizens, wherever they are, should be eligible to vote.
So it's irrelevant to you whether he stays or goes. That's for the Syrian people.
Yes, it's for them to decide. And I believe this view, which was rejected for quite some time after the Syrian crisis began, is now shared by more and more countries.
What is a matter for you is when Russia withdraws from Syria. I mean, President Putin first raised the prospect in March 2016. He said that Russia had largely achieved her objectives there. Again, December 2017. By the end of this year, can we expect Russia to be out of Syria?
No, I don't think that this is something which we can intelligently discuss. We don't like artificial deadlines. But we have been consistently reducing our military presence in Syria. And the last reduction took place a few days ago, and President Putin the other day mentioned about this. About more than 1,000 troops have come back to Russia, and some aircraft and other equipment. So it depends on what is the actual situation on the ground. Yes, we managed together with our colleagues, with the Syrian army, with the help of the opposition, which I would call patriotic opposition. We managed not to allow the plans to create a caliphate by ISIL happen. But some remnants of ISIL are very much there. Jabhat al-Nusra is still there. They are now preventing the deal on the southern Syrian de-escalation area to be implemented fully. So there are some leftovers, and besides, we do have not actually full-fledged bases, but we have two places where our naval ships and our aircraft are located in Syria, and they might be usefully kept for quite some time.
So clearly Syria will be on the agenda at the summit. I just want to talk about some other things that might be. For example, you mentioned sanctions. Do you think that sanctions will be lifted, given that the EU has just talked about extended them? Do you think you can get Trump to commit to them?
Well, actually, I mentioned sanctions only in the context of deterioration of relations. We are not raising sanctions, pleading to remove them. It's not our business. It's for those who introduce sanctions to decide whether they want to continue or whether common sense would prevail.
Well, your president said he would like them lifted very recently.
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't mind them lifted, but we wouldn't mind also using this period to build up our own capacity in key sectors of economy, of our security, and other areas on which a state, an independent state, depends. And the recent years, we learned a lot, including the fact that on these issues you cannot rely on the West. You cannot rely on Western technologies because they can be abruptly stopped any moment. You cannot rely on the items which are essential for day-to-day living of the population coming from the West, because this could also be stopped. So we are drawing lessons, but we certainly wouldn't be against sanctions to be lifted, and we would reciprocate because we do have some countermeasures in place.
What are you prepared to give in this summit? For example, if Donald Trump says he wants the NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden back in the US, is that something that you'd consider, that you could put on the table?
We never discussed Edward Snowden with this administration, and President Putin addressed the issue some years ago, when he was asked the question, he said, "This is for Edward Snowden to decide. We respect his rights as an individual, and that's why we were not we were not in a position to expel him against his will, because he found himself in Russia, by the way, without even the US passport, which was discontinued as he was flying from Hong Kong."
So, but that's not going to be up for discussion in your...
I don't know why people start asking this particular question in relation to the summit. Edward Snowden is the master of his own destiny.
Can you, at the summit, can President Trump give Donald Trump any assurances that, given that US intelligence believes that the presidential elections were meddled with, can President Putin give any assurances that the upcoming midterm elections in a few months' time will not be meddled with by Russia?
We would prefer some facts, because we cannot intelligently discuss something which is based on highly likely.
Well, it's more than highly likely, though,
Salisbury, no. The investigation in the United States has been going for how long? A year and a half now?
Well, Robert Mueller indicted the Internet Research Agency, the Russian troll factory. I mean, that was a 37-page indictment.
Indictment is something which requires a trial. And I understand they have submitted their own case, and they challenged quite a number of things which were used for the indictment. So let's not jump the gun. I love Lewis Carroll, but I don't think that the logic of the Queen, who said sentence first, verdict later, I don't think this logic is going to prevail. But so far, you take the presidential election in the United States, take Brexit, take Salisbury case, take this tragedy with Malaysian Boeing MH17 flight. It's all based on investigation continues, but you're guilty already. It cannot work this way.
But is Russia frightened of the truth? Because it just seems that whenever an authority, whether it's the UN or the chemical weapons watchdog, the OPCW, whenever they try to get to the facts, Russia objects.
No, I believe the public and respected journalists like you have been misinformed. The OPCW must operate on the basis of the Chemical Weapons Convention, which says bluntly that there is only one procedure when you want to establish facts. First, experts of OPCW must themselves, without delegating this authority to anyone, must themselves go to the place of the alleged incident. They must themselves, with their own hands and with their own equipment, take samples, and they must continue holding the substances in their hands until they reach a certified laboratory. In the recent cases, especially in the infamous case of Han Shi-hun, April last year, when the Syrian government was accused of using aerial bombs to deliver chemical weapons to Han Shi-hun place, the OPCW never visited the place. They never took samples themselves. When we asked where did they get samples, they said the Brits and the French gave it to us. We asked why don't you go there?
Have you lost faith in the OPCW?
Wait a second, it's an important information. So, let's not speak slogans, let's speak facts. So they didn't go there, but they said, we got the samples. We asked where from. They said the British and the French got it for us. Why don't you go? Well, it's not very safe. We told them if the Brits and the French made it there, or rather they know people who can get there safely, why don't you ask Paris and London to ensure safety for your own inspectors to get there? We told the same to the French and to the British. They said, no, this is something which we cannot share with you. How we got hold of this? So, no procedures regarding the taking samples. Chain of custody, meaning that the inspectors themselves cannot delegate to anyone the delivery of the samples to the laboratory. These procedures embodied and enshrined in the convention, they were violated. And the report on this Han Shi-hun case, submitted by this joint investigating mechanism last fall, was full of highly likely, by all probability, we have good reasons to believe, and so on and so forth. We invited the authors of the report to the Security Council, trying to get some credible information from them. Impossible. They were stonewalled, they refused to talk. And we said, guys, if you want to work on the basis of violation of the convention procedures, this cannot continue.
I mean, you're using very strong language.
We did not extend their mandate, but we suggested a new mechanism, insisting that this new mechanism must not violate from the procedures embodied in the convention.
So
then
do you still have faith in the OPCW?
Until recently we did, but the organization was grossly manipulated a couple of days ago when the Brits and others convened this special session of the conference of the parties to the state parties to the convention, and when they passed a decision by vote which basically violates the convention in all its provisions, giving the technical secretary, it's called technical secretary, the right to establish guilt. I think that this is a step which was not thought through very thoroughly,
well, except
because it's a very dangerous nail.
Well, it's dangerous potentially for Russia, because now the chemical weapons watchdog can apportion blame to the likes of Russia. I mean, are you fearful of the truth?
No. I'm fearful for the future of OPCW and Chemical Weapons Convention.
Will you withdraw from the OPCW?
Well, if people prefer to violate convention, if they say that this is the will of the majority, when they convene this conference, all kind of tricks were used, including mobilizing small countries who don't have any representation in The Hague, paying for their travel expenses, paying for their hotel bills, for some per diem. We know all this, and they know this. So when a convention is grossly violated, I don't think you can really avoid raising concern. And we will try to repair the situation. But if, because this decision of a couple of days ago would go to the regular conference of the state parties, but if this is not repaired, I believe the days of the OPCW would be counted. At least it would not remain as a universal organization.
The OPCW has also investigated the case of the Skripals. I wanted to ask you, do you think using a nerve agent to poison a former spy and his child, a policeman on the streets of a cathedral city in Britain, do you think that is the act of a rational state?
A rational state? Not at all. It's an act of crime, very bad crime. And we, from the very beginning, suggested that we investigate this together because it is our citizen. At least the daughter is our citizen. The father is, I think, he is having dual citizenship. He is Russian citizen and the British subject. From the very beginning, we suggested joint investigation. We asked so many questions, including the questions related to Chemical Weapons Convention procedures. We were told in response that the British side doesn't want to listen, because we have to tell only one thing. Did Putin order this? Or did Putin lost control of the people who did? That's all the Brits wanted to discuss. The inconsistencies in the situation with Skripals are very troubling. We never managed to get a consular access to our citizen in violation of all international convention on diplomatic and consular relations. We never got any credible explanation why the nephew or an aunt of this Yulia Skripal is not given visa. She wants to visit and to see her sister-in-law, or cousin, I think, and many other things related to the action itself.
But why would Britain give consular access, drag into the investigation the country suspected of being behind this attack?
You know that investigation continues, that the Scotland Yard said it will take a few more months. Boris Johnson recently mentioned that the place is being disinfected 6 months or 4 months after the incident. And the policemen became miraculously fine, the Skripals became miraculously fine. People now talk about leveling the house where they lived, leveling the house of the policemen. It all looks like consistent physical extermination of the evidence. Like the benches in the park were removed immediately. And of course, the video images when the policemen or special forces in special attire go to take a look at this bench with people without any protection moving around. It all looks very weird, you know.
But Mr. Lavrov, are you accusing the British state of a cover-up of this whole incident?
I don't exclude this. As long as they don't give us information, you know that about 10 Russian citizens have died in London during the past years.
Why do you think that is?
All 10 cases have been investigated in a secret format. We don't understand why. And frankly, if you want to know the reason, well, it's, you know, one of the wise guys said, who is to benefit? Certainly, the United Kingdom benefited politically from what is going on. Actually, it's come to think of it, it's an interesting situation whereby a country which is leaving the European Union is determining the European Union policy on Russia. When they were running in all capitals of the European Union, saying you must expel the Russian diplomats, you must expel them. So they did, most of them, some didn't. And then we privately asked those who decided to join Britain in this action whether any proof was given in addition to what was said publicly. They said no, but they said we will promise that later, as investigation proceeds, we would be given more facts.
But you ask who benefits.
Do you think it's okay?
But you ask who benefits, and there are many in the West who say that the chaos, whether it's Brexit, whether it's Skripals, whether it's Trump in the White House.
You forgot Catalonia. And you forgot
leaving aside Catalonia for a second.
And you forgot forthcoming elections in Sweden as the prime minister.
Okay, well, we'll include that later. But the chaos.
Macedonia, Montenegro.
Okay, answer me this: does the chaos benefit Russia, as some in the West say?
You have to be within the historical framework, chronological framework. You mean the chaos benefits Russia a couple of weeks before the presidential elections and the months before the World Cup? What do you think?
I'm asking you. Does chaos benefit Russia? Chaos around the world.
I want to clarify the issue. Does chaos benefit Russia a couple of days before the presidential elections and a couple of months before the World Cup? Is it the question?
Well, you talk about a new world order that you're hoping Russia will help shape. Much easier to shape that world order if the EU is in chaos, if you're holding the ring in the Middle East, if you're calling the shots in Syria.
No.
Russia potentially benefits.
This is absolutely wrong. It's misreading what I said. I didn't say that Russia wants to shape a new world order.
To help shape.
I said that Russia must be one of the players on an equal basis discussing how the objective reality of multipolarity being developed in front of our eyes could be managed the way which would be acceptable to all. That's what I said. And the interests of those who determine the Russophobic policy in the West, they're absolutely diametrically different. The interest of them is to punish Russia, is to downgrade Russia, and to keep...
Why do you think?
Because it is very painful to lose half millennium of domination in the world affairs. In a nutshell, that's the answer. And this is not a criticism, this is a statement of fact. I understand when people used to call the shots in India, in Africa, in Asia, elsewhere, and then people understand that this time is past.
Is Brexit good for Britain? Is it good for Russia, do you think?
This is for the UK subjects to discuss.
Good for Russia, though?
I don't understand why we should be thinking in this vein. It's something which the Brits decided. It's something which they still discuss with the European Union, the divorce, the problems inside the country. We also know that, of course, we follow the news that the parliament has one position, some public activists want, rethinking and so on and so forth.
Does it look like chaos to you in Theresa May's Britain?
Look, it's something which happened by developments inside the United Kingdom. And we only want clarity. What will be the basis on which we continue to work with the European Union? What will be the basis on which we might someday restore the relations with the United Kingdom when they take some reasonable course and pragmatic course and not overly ideologized, highly likely attitude. Again, I believe this must be very much understood by those in the West, especially by the liberals, who keep saying that the rule of law must prevail. Rule of law must prevail. In my view, rule of law means that unless proven guilty, you cannot sentence people. And that's what's happening with Skripal, that's what's happening with MH17, that's what's happening with OPCW being an instrument of those who would like to make this highly likely the order of the day in Syria.
Just returning to the summit for a couple of final questions. Does it help Russia in her dealings with Donald Trump that so many people think that you have compromising material, so-called compromat on him?
Look, I hear this for the first time, that we have compromising material on Donald Trump. That's what this special counselor Mueller is trying to dig. And I stopped reading news from this investigation because unlike what people say, that they have, when Rex Tillerson was Secretary of State, he once stated publicly that they have undeniable proof. And then during our contact, I said, Rex, can you give us this undeniable proof to us? Because we want to understand what's going on. Maybe this is something which we can explain. He said, well, we cannot give it to you, we cannot compromise sources, and besides, your special services, your security people know everything. Ask them. Is it the way to handle serious things? It's a matter which is used to ruin the Russian-American relations. And to answer the way which he did, I believe it's not mature. It's very childish, I think, and I hope that people who try to dig something to prove that we decided the future of the greatest country on earth through some internet agency, it's ridiculous. I understand that the Democrats in the United States are really quite nervous. I understand that UK is nervous. There were leaks in one of in the Times, I think, saying that cabinet members are very nervous that Trump and Putin might get along.
So you do read the papers?
I read the extracts which my people give me, because the papers, I love reading papers with a cup of coffee, but unfortunately don't always have time.
Well, finally, on that point of compromat, I mean, the ex-FBI director James Comey has said, and I quote, "It's possible the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. Do you think that's possible?
Well, he said it's possible. Ask him.
Do you think it's possible? It's happened in Moscow, allegedly. I
don't know what people can invent again. I think I read about this story a couple of years ago when all this started. Again, if people base the real policies vis-à-vis a country, state-to-state policies, on the basis of it is possible, on the basis of highly likely, this is shameful. And I believe that what is being done in the context of the Russia Gate in the United States, as President Putin repeatedly said, is manifestation of deep domestic controversy, because the losers don't have the guts to accept the loss, to accept that they lost the elections.
Foreign Minister, thank you very much. Spasibo.
Thank you.
Thank you.